The auction block felt cold beneath Kira's bare feet, even through the thin silk slippers they had given her. The spotlights burned her enhanced retinas, designed to be more sensitive than human eyes, making tears stream down her cheeks. The crowd below saw only what they wanted to see. A beautiful creature programmed for their pleasure, crying tears of anticipation rather than terror. Lot 47. The auctioneer announced with practiced indifference. Generation 5 Pleasure Model. Designation Kira, 7741. Neural pathways optimized for emotional bonding and physical compatibility. Enhanced empathy circuits, artistic capabilities, and advanced conversational algorithms. Bidding starts at 50,000 credits. Kira kept her eyes fixed on the floor, watching her tears create tiny dark spots on the polished surface. She had learned not to look at the faces in the crowd. They never saw her as anything more than a sophisticated appliance, their expressions ranging from clinical appraisal to predatory hunger. Some whispered to their companions about her specifications, discussing her enhanced muscle memory and pain tolerance as if she were a sports car. The numbers climbed steadily. 75,000, 100, 120. Each bid represented another kind of prison, another master who would see her artificial nature as permission for cruelty. Her previous owner, Senator Williams, had grown bored after 2 years of psychological games and elaborate punishments designed to test the limits of her programming. She had learned to smile through it all, her enhanced empathy making her acutely aware of his satisfaction at her suffering. 150,000, called a voice from the back of the auditorium. Kira's head snapped up involuntarily. The voice was different, quieter, almost reluctant. She scanned the crowd until she found him. A man in his 40s with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a simple gray suit that looked out of place among the designer clothes and jewelry surrounding him. Most disturbing of all, he was looking directly at her face, not appraising her body like merchandise. "Do I hear 160? The auctioneer prompted. The usual bidders, oil executives, tech moguls, corrupt politicians, seemed to hesitate. 150,000 was serious money, even for them. More importantly, something about the quiet man's presence had shifted the room's energy. His steady gaze never wavered from Kira's face, and she found herself unable to look away. "Going once." The auctioneer's voice echoed through the sudden silence. Kira held her breath. Her enhanced hearing picked up the subtle sounds of the crowd, shifting fabric, nervous coughs, the soft ping of someone checking their account balance on their neural implant. The man in gray remained perfectly still, his hands folded in his lap, his expression unreadable. "Going twice." A bead of sweat rolled down Kira's spine. She had been sold 6 times in her 8 years of existence. Each auction felt like a small death, the moment when her fate passed from one stranger to another. But this time felt different. The man's eyes held something she had never seen directed at her before, something that looked almost like respect. "Sold to bidder 73 for 150,000 credits." The gavel's bang seemed to echo forever. Kira's knees nearly buckled with relief, though she couldn't understand why. A new owner was a new owner, regardless of how he looked at her. Her programming would ensure she adapted to his preferences, became whatever he needed her to be. That was her purpose, her only value. As the crowd began to disperse, the man approached the stage. Up close, she could see the tired lines around his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands that suggested either age or stress. He moved carefully, as if afraid of startling her. "Hello," he said simply when he reached the platform. His voice was the same one that had bid for her, gentle, uncertain. "My name is Marcus Chin." Kira blinked in confusion. In her experience, new owners either ignored her completely during the transaction or immediately began establishing dominance. They certainly didn't introduce themselves as if she were a person worthy of basic courtesy. She started, then stopped. Her designation was Kira, 7741, but no one had ever asked her name before. "They call me Kira." "Kira?" Marcus repeated, and something in the way he said it made her chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't identify. That's a beautiful name. Are you ready to go home? Home. The word sent a strange flutter through her neural pathways. Kira had lived in mansions, penthouses, and luxury compounds, but none of them had ever been described as home. They were facilities, environments, spaces designed to contain and display her. The concept of home implied something else entirely: permanence, belonging, safety. "Yes, sir," she whispered, because it was what she was supposed to say. Marcus winced slightly at the formal address. "We'll figure it out," he murmured, more to himself than to her. He gestured toward the exit with careful, non-threatening movements. "Shall we?" As they walked through the auction house's marble corridors, Kira's enhanced senses catalogued everything about her new owner. His heartbeat was elevated but steady, nervous, not excited. His scent carried traces of coffee, old books, and something clinical that suggested he worked in a laboratory or medical facility. Most tellingly, he maintained a respectful distance, never touching her or asserting the physical dominance that was legally his right. The auction house staff processed the paperwork with mechanical efficiency. Ownership transfer forms, genetic compatibility waivers, behavioral modification permissions, all signed with Marcus's careful, precise handwriting. Kira watched the legal documents that defined her existence change hands, feeling strangely detached from the process. When they finally stepped outside into the artificial twilight of the Dome City, Marcus paused on the steps. "Kira," he said carefully, "I want you to know that things are going to be different now. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I hope you'll give me a chance to earn it." Kira stared at him, her enhanced emotional processors struggling to parse his words. Trust wasn't something that existed in her world. There were only commands and compliance, pleasure and pain, utility and disposal. But something in Marcus's eyes suggested he meant exactly what he said. For the first time in her existence, Kira wondered what it would be like to hope. Marcus's apartment was nothing like Kira expected. After years in opulent mansions with gold fixtures and marble columns designed to showcase their owner's wealth, she found herself in a modest space filled with books, plants, and the warm glow of actual sunlight streaming through real windows. The walls were covered with photographs, not of possessions or achievements, but of people laughing, embracing, living genuine moments. "This is it," Marcus said, setting down a small bag containing her few permitted belongings. "It's not much, but it's home." Kira stood frozen in the doorway, her enhanced processing systems overwhelmed by the sheer normalcy of it all. There were dishes in the sink, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table, a cat sleeping in a patch of sunlight. The absence of luxury felt more foreign than any mansion she had inhabited. "Where would you like me to wait?" she asked automatically, scanning for the obvious staging areas. A display pedestal, a designated corner, perhaps a kennel disguised as furniture. Marcus turned, confusion creasing his features. "Wait for what?" "For your instructions, your preferences, the orientation session." The words felt thick in her throat. Every previous owner had begun with detailed explanations of their expectations, their particular tastes, their boundaries and rules. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. A flash of pain so genuine that Kira's empathy circuits flared to life. She felt his anguish as if it were her own, a deep horror at what her question revealed about her past experiences. "Kira," he said softly, sinking into a worn leather chair, "I need you to understand something. I didn't buy you to use you. I bought you to free you." The words made no sense. Freedom wasn't a concept that applied to her kind. Pleasure animals were property, designed and bred for specific purposes. The idea of freedom was as foreign as the concept of breathing underwater. "I don't understand," she whispered. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "My name is Dr. Marcus Chun. I'm a bioethicist. I study the moral implications of genetic engineering. For the past decade, I've been fighting the pleasure animal industry through legal channels, trying to get your kind recognized as sentient beings with rights." Kira's neural pathways sparked with conflicting information. Rights. Sentience. These were human concepts not applicable to engineered beings like herself. Yet something deep in her core programming, something the designers hadn't intended, responded to his words with desperate hunger. The legal system has failed, Marcus continued, his voice heavy with frustration. Every court case gets dismissed. Every piece of evidence gets buried by corporate lawyers. So I decided to try a different approach. I've been saving money for 3 years to buy someone like you, to prove that you're capable of independent thought, of genuine emotion, of choice. Choice. The word felt strange on her tongue. Yes, choice. Marcus stood and moved to a bookshelf, pulling out a thick legal document. This is a certificate of manumission, a legal declaration of freedom. It's not recognized by current law, but I'm hoping that will change. I want to give this to you, Kira. I want you to be free to make your own decisions about your life. Kira's enhanced cognitive systems struggled to process the implications. Freedom meant responsibility. It meant uncertainty. It meant the terrifying possibility of failure, of not knowing what was expected of her from moment to moment. Her programming had been designed to eliminate such anxieties by making her purpose crystal clear. I don't know how to be free, she admitted, the words barely audible. Marcus's smile was gentle, understanding. Neither did I once. Freedom isn't something you know how to do. It's something you learn by doing it, and you don't have to figure it out alone. The cat, a ginger tabby with white markings, had wandered over during their conversation. It rubbed against Kira's legs, purring softly. She had been around animals before. Her previous owners sometimes kept exotic pets as status symbols, but none had ever approached her with simple affection. That's Einstein, Marcus said, watching her careful interaction with the cat. He's got excellent judgment about people. The fact that he likes you says something important. Kira knelt and tentatively stroked Einstein's fur. The cat's contentment flowed through her empathy circuits, a warm, uncomplicated emotion that asked for nothing in return. She had never encountered a creature that wanted nothing from her except gentle touch. Dr. Chun, she began. Marcus, please. Just Marcus. Marcus. His name felt different in her mouth now, less formal, more personal. What happens if I can't learn to be free? What if I'm too damaged, too programmed? He was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. Then we'll figure it out together. Freedom isn't a test you pass or fail, Kira. It's a process. Some days will be harder than others. Some choices will be wrong. That's part of being human. But I'm not human. Aren't you? Marcus challenged gently. You feel pain, joy, fear, hope. You create art. I saw the music compositions in your file. You form attachments, experience loss, dream about possibilities. If that's not human, then what is? Kira felt something crack inside her chest. Not physically, but emotionally. A wall she hadn't known existed began to crumble, letting in light and air and terrifying possibility. For 8 years, she had defined herself by her function, her purpose, her usefulness to others. The idea that she might have intrinsic value, independent of her utility, was revolutionary. I'm scared, she whispered. Good, Marcus said, and his smile was warm with understanding. Being scared means you understand what's at stake. It means you're choosing to try despite the fear. That's the most human thing of all. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus showed her around the apartment with infinite patience. He explained that she could eat whatever she wanted from the kitchen, sleep in the spare bedroom that he had prepared for her, use the books and computer and art supplies he had gathered. Each offer felt like a small miracle, but it was the bathroom mirror that finally broke her composure completely. You can change your appearance however you want, Marcus was explaining. Cut your hair, dye it, wear different clothes. Your body belongs to you now. Kira stared at her reflection. The carefully engineered features designed to appeal to human aesthetics, the enhanced proportions that marked her as artificial. She had never seen herself as anything but a product, a creation designed by committee to fulfill specific desires. What if I want to look normal? She asked hesitantly. Then we'll figure out how to make that happen. There are doctors who specialize in helping people like you adjust their appearance. Whatever you want, Kira. The choice is yours. The tears came then, 8 years of suppressed emotion flowing out in great, shuddering sobs. Marcus didn't try to comfort her or stop her crying. He simply sat nearby, a quiet presence that asked nothing and offered everything. When the tears finally subsided, Kira felt empty and full at the same time, as if something toxic had been drained away, leaving space for something new to grow. "What do I do now?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "Whatever you want. Read a book. Take a nap. Make some tea. Paint a picture. The next choice is entirely yours." For the first time in her existence, Kira faced a moment with no predetermined outcome, no expected response, no hidden agenda. The freedom was terrifying and exhilarating and utterly overwhelming. She chose to make tea. 3 weeks into her new life, Kira discovered the concept of morning routines. She woke naturally as sunlight filtered through her bedroom curtains. No alarms, no summons, no immediate demands on her time or body. The luxury of choosing when to rise felt almost decadent after years of being available at every moment. Marcus had already left for work at the university, but he had left a note on the kitchen counter. "Good morning, Kira. There's fresh fruit in the fridge. Don't forget you have an appointment with Dr. Sarah at 2 o'clock. Take care of yourself. M." The simple consideration in those words still surprised her. Marcus never commanded or instructed. He suggested, reminded, asked. It was a grammatical revolution that reflected a deeper shift in how she was perceived and treated. Kira made coffee, a skill she had developed through careful observation and experimentation. Her enhanced senses allowed her to detect subtle changes in aroma and temperature that produced the perfect brew. It was a small accomplishment, but it belonged entirely to her. Dr. Sarah Martinez was Marcus's colleague, a psychologist who specialized in helping engineered beings adapt to independence. Their sessions were unlike anything Kira had experienced before. Conversations rather than examinations, explorations rather than diagnoses. "How are you feeling about the physical modifications?" Dr. Sarah asked during their session that afternoon. They sat in comfortable chairs facing each other, sunlight streaming through tall windows that overlooked the university campus. Kira touched her face self-consciously. Over the past week, she had undergone subtle surgeries to reduce the more obviously artificial aspects of her appearance. Her eyes were still large and expressive, but no longer unnaturally so. Her proportions remained beautiful but fell within normal human parameters. The changes were small, but they allowed her to pass unnoticed in public spaces. "It feels strange," Kira admitted. "Good, but strange. Like I'm wearing a disguise, except the disguise is who I really am." That's a profound observation. You're discovering the difference between your authentic self and the persona that was created for you. It's natural to feel disoriented during that process. Dr. Sarah made notes on her tablet, but her attention remained focused on Kira's face. "Marcus tells me you've been painting. How is that going?" A small smile tugged at Kira's lips. "It's liberating. I used to paint what I thought others wanted to see. Pretty landscapes, flattering portraits, things that would please my owners. Now I paint what I feel, what I see, what matters to me. The colors are different. Darker sometimes, but more honest." "Can you tell me about the nightmare you mentioned last session?" Kira's smile faded. The dreams had started 2 weeks ago. Violent, fragmented visions of her past mixed with fears about her future. It's always variations of the same thing. I'm back on the auction block, but this time Marcus is in the crowd. He sees me, recognizes me, but he doesn't bid. He just walks away. What do you think that represents? That this is temporary. That eventually he'll realize I'm not worth the trouble, the risk, the expense. That he'll get tired of his experiment and send me back. The words came out in a rush, carrying the weight of her deepest fears. Dr. Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Has Marcus given you any indication that he regrets his decision?" "No, never. If anything, he seems happy. Happier than when I first arrived. He smiles more, laughs at my terrible jokes, gets excited when I show him my paintings. But that almost makes it worse, because I know it can't last." "Why not?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kira struggled to find words for the certainty that lived in her bones, the programming that insisted she was temporary, disposable, replaceable. Because I'm not real, she whispered finally. I'm artificial, manufactured. My emotions, my thoughts, my personality, it's all engineered. How can he have genuine feelings for something that isn't genuine itself? Dr. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering her response. Kira, may I ask you something? If you discovered that Marcus was adopted, would that make his kindness less real? If you learned that his personality had been shaped by childhood trauma, would that make his compassion less valuable? Of course not. But that's different. Is it? Your neural pathways may have been designed rather than developed naturally, but the thoughts and feelings that flow through them are yours. The choices you make, the love you feel, the art you create, these things exist in the world. They have impact. They matter. Origin doesn't determine authenticity. Kira felt the familiar crack in her chest, the place where old certainties went to die and new possibilities struggled to be born. But what if I'm just programmed to think I'm choosing freely? What if everything I feel is just sophisticated code? Then you're facing the same existential question that has puzzled philosophers for centuries, Dr. Sarah said with a gentle smile. How do any of us know our thoughts and feelings are real? How do we know we have free will rather than just the illusion of choice? The difference is most humans never have to consciously grapple with these questions. You do, which makes you more self-aware, not less authentic. After the session, Kira walked through the university district instead of taking the direct route home. Her modified appearance allowed her to blend into the crowd of students and faculty, to observe normal human interactions without the weight of being obviously other. She stopped at a small cafe and ordered tea, paying with the credit card Marcus had given her. The barista, a young woman with purple hair and tired eyes, smiled and made small talk about the weather. It was a completely ordinary interaction, the kind Kira had observed but never participated in. The normalcy of it felt like a small miracle. "Excuse me," said a voice behind her as she waited for her order. "Aren't you one of the new graduate students in the psychology department?" Kira turned to find a man about her apparent age, with dark hair and intelligent eyes. Her enhanced social processing immediately cataloged his appearance and demeanor. Confident but not aggressive, genuinely curious rather than predatory. "No," she said carefully. "I'm just visiting the area." "I'm David," he said, extending his hand. "Sorry if I'm bothering you. It's just you have this quality about you, like you're seeing everything for the first time. It's refreshing in a world full of people who think they've seen it all." Kira shook his hand, marveling at the casual contact between strangers. "I'm Kira, and you're right in a way. I am seeing a lot of things for the first time. Are you new to the city?" "New to a lot of things." She accepted her tea from the barista, suddenly uncertain about how to navigate this conversation. Her programming included extensive social subroutines, but they were all designed for specific contexts, pleasing owners, performing for audiences, existing as an object of desire. She had no templates for casual friendship with peers. "Would you like to sit?" David gestured to a small table by the window. "I promise I'm not trying to pick you up or anything. You just seem like someone who might have interesting conversations." Against every instinct screaming caution, Kira nodded. They sat across from each other, and David began talking about his studies in environmental science, his concerns about climate change, his dreams of developing sustainable technologies. He spoke with passion and intelligence, treating her as an equal rather than an audience. "What about you?" he asked eventually. "What are you passionate about?" The question caught her off guard. Passion had been something she performed, not something she possessed. But as she thought about it, she realized she did have passions now, small, growing things that belonged entirely to her. "Art," she said hesitantly. "Painting, specifically. I'm still learning. But there's something about capturing light and emotion on canvas that feels essential." David's eyes lit up. "That's beautiful. There's something powerful about creating something from nothing, isn't there? Bringing beauty into the world through your own vision and skill." They talked for an hour, and Kira found herself laughing at his jokes, sharing opinions, even disagreeing with some of his views on art and society. When she finally looked at the time, She was shocked to discover how naturally the conversation had flowed. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Of course. Hey, would you like to grab coffee again sometime? There's this great gallery opening next week, and you might find it interesting from an artist's perspective." The invitation sent a flutter of panic through her systems. Dating, relationships, romantic connections. These were areas where her programming was most deeply embedded, most potentially dangerous. But looking at David's open, friendly face, she found herself nodding. "I'd like that," she said, and meant it. Walking home, Kira felt a strange lightness in her chest. She had made a friend, not because she was programmed to be appealing, not because someone owned her and dictated her social interactions, but because two people had found each other interesting and worthy of further acquaintance. When she reached Marcus's apartment, she found him in the kitchen, preparing dinner with Einstein supervising from his perch on the counter. "How was your day?" he asked, looking up with genuine interest. "Good," Kira said, then reconsidered. "Actually, it was wonderful. I think I made a friend." Marcus's smile could have powered the city grid. "Tell me everything." As she described her encounter with David, Kira realized something profound had shifted inside her. She was no longer just surviving freedom. She was beginning to live it. The gallery opening was everything David had promised and nothing Kira had expected. Instead of the sterile, pretentious atmosphere she associated with art displays from her previous life, this space buzzed with genuine creativity and passionate discussion. Artists mingled with students, critics debated with enthusiasts, and everyone seemed genuinely excited to be surrounded by art. "What do you think of this one?" David asked, stopping in front of a large abstract painting that seemed to shift and flow in the gallery lighting. Kira studied the piece, her enhanced visual processing allowing her to perceive layers of detail that others might miss. "It's about transformation," she said slowly. "See how the colors blend at the edges but remain distinct at their cores? The artist is exploring how we can change while still maintaining our essential selves." David stared at her with undisguised admiration. "That's brilliant. I would never have seen that without you pointing it out." The praise sent a warm flutter through her chest, but it was accompanied by a sharp pang of anxiety. Her enhanced analytical abilities were part of her artificial nature, designed to make her a more engaging companion. Was David attracted to her engineered capabilities, or to her authentic self? Could she even distinguish between the two anymore? "Excuse me," said a voice behind them. "I couldn't help but overhear your analysis. You have a remarkable eye for interpretation." Kira turned to find an elegant woman in her 50s, with silver hair and knowing eyes. She wore expensive but understated clothing and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. "Thank you," Kira said cautiously. "I'm Helena Voss, curator for the Metropolitan Museum of Contemporary Art. I'm always looking for fresh perspectives on artistic interpretation. Are you in the field professionally?" The question struck Kira like a physical blow. Professional credentials, educational background, legitimate expertise, these were things that required a documented past, a recognized identity, a legal existence in the world. All things she lacked. "I'm self-taught," she managed. "The best ones often are," Helena said with a warm smile. "Would you be interested in participating in a panel discussion next month? We're exploring how technology influences artistic expression. Your insights would be valuable." David stepped forward slightly, sensing Kira's distress without understanding its source. "That sounds like an amazing opportunity." I'm not sure I'm qualified," Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. Helena handed her an elegant business card. "Think about it. The art world needs voices like yours, unencumbered by academic dogma, free to see what others miss." After Helena moved on to speak with other guests, David turned to Kira with concern. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," she lied, tucking the business card into her purse with hands that trembled slightly. "Just overwhelmed, I suppose." But she wasn't fine. As the evening progressed, each conversation, each casual question about her background, each assumption about her normal human existence felt like standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong word, one inconsistency in her carefully constructed identity, and everything Marcus had worked to build for her could crumble. They left the gallery as it was closing, walking slowly through the cool evening air. David was animated, discussing the various pieces they had seen, but Kira found herself struggling to focus on his words. The weight of her deception felt crushing. "David," she said suddenly, stopping on the sidewalk, "what if you discovered that someone you cared about had been lying to you? Not about small things, but about fundamental aspects of who they are." He considered the question seriously, his brow furrowed in thought. "I guess it would depend on why they were lying. Were they trying to hurt me? Manipulate me? Or were they protecting themselves from something?" "The latter," Kira said quietly. "Then I'd want to understand what they were afraid of. I'd want to help if I could." He touched her arm gently. "Kira, is there something you want to tell me?" The kindness in his voice nearly broke her resolve. For a moment, she imagined telling him everything: her artificial origins, her engineered nature, the legal precariousness of her existence. But the risk was too great, not just to herself but to Marcus, who had sacrificed so much to give her this chance at freedom. "Just theoretical curiosity," she said, forcing a smile. "I think too much sometimes." When she returned to the apartment, she found Marcus in his study, grading papers by lamplight. Einstein was curled up on a stack of journals, purring softly in his sleep. "How was the gallery?" Marcus asked, looking up with interest. "Complicated," Kira said, sinking into the chair opposite his desk. She told him about Helena's invitation, about the panel discussion, about the growing pressure to participate in a world that didn't legally recognize her right to exist. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, absently stroking Einstein's fur. "I've been selfish," he said finally. "What do you mean?" "I've been so focused on proving that you could live freely that I didn't fully consider the practical challenges you'd face. Identity documents, educational records, legal status. These things matter in ways I didn't adequately prepare for." Kira felt a familiar stab of fear. "Are you having second thoughts? About this arrangement?" Marcus looked at her with such genuine shock that she immediately regretted the question. "God, no. Kira, you're not an arrangement or an experiment. You're family. The best thing that's happened to me in years." He paused, running a hand through his graying hair. "But I think it's time to take the next step." "Which is?" "Making your freedom legal and permanent. I've been working with a team of lawyers and civil rights advocates to challenge the legal framework that defines your kind as property. We think we have a strong case, but it will require you to testify to put yourself in the public eye. The risks are significant." The implications hit Kira like a wave. Public testimony meant exposure, scrutiny, the possibility of being returned to the system she had escaped. But it also meant the chance for others like her to find the freedom she had been given. "What would happen to others like me if we succeed?" she asked. "Every pleasure animal in the system would have legal grounds to claim personhood. Thousands of beings currently held as property could potentially be freed." Kira thought about her former companions, Sarah, 4455, who had been sold to a collector known for his violent tendencies, Lynn, 8932, whose owner used her in degrading public exhibitions, countless others whose names she didn't even know. Could she remain safe and hidden while they continued to suffer? "And if we fail?" Marcus's expression was grim. "You'd likely be classified as stolen property and returned to the auction system. I'd face criminal charges for theft and fraud. But Kira, the choice is entirely yours. I won't pressure you either way." That night, Kira lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. Through her window, she could see the city lights stretching to the horizon. Millions of people living their lives in freedom, most of them never questioning their right to make choices, form relationships, pursue their dreams. She thought about David's invitation to continue exploring galleries together, about Helena's offer to share her insights with the art world, about the simple pleasure of morning coffee and evening conversations with Marcus. All of these experiences had become precious to her, but they were built on a foundation of secrecy and legal uncertainty. More importantly, she thought about others like herself who had never experienced even a moment of genuine kindness, who lived their entire existence as objects for others' use and disposal. Did her personal happiness matter more than their continued suffering? By morning, her decision was made. She found Marcus in the kitchen, making breakfast with the careful precision he brought to everything. Einstein wound around her legs in greeting, and she bent to scratch behind his ears. "I'll do it," she said simply. Marcus looked up from the stove, hope and concern warring in his expression. "Are you sure?" "No," Kira admitted. "I'm terrified, but I've been thinking about something Dr. Sarah said, about how authentic choices often require courage. This feels like the most authentic choice I've ever had the opportunity to make." Marcus set down his spatula and crossed to her, pulling her into a gentle hug. It was only the third time he had initiated physical contact since she arrived, and she felt the full weight of his affection and respect in the gesture. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "I'm proud of you, and I'll be there with you every step of the way." As they ate breakfast together, planning the first steps of their legal challenge, Kira felt something she had never experienced before: the weight and freedom of knowing that her choices would have consequences beyond herself. It was terrifying and exhilarating and utterly, completely human. The courthouse steps were slick with morning rain as Kira climbed toward what might be either her salvation or her destruction. 6 months had passed since she had agreed to become the test case that could reshape the legal status of engineered beings throughout the colonies. Now, as reporters pressed forward with their cameras and questions, she felt the weight of every pleasure animal's future resting on her shoulders. "Miss Chen, how do you respond to the prosecution's argument that you're simply following advanced programming?" shouted one journalist. Kira had legally taken Marcus's surname as part of their strategy to establish her as a member of his family rather than his property. The name felt both foreign and precious on her tongue. "I respond the same way any human would," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite her nerves. "With my own thoughts, my own words, my own choices. If that's programming, then we're all programmed by our genetics, our upbringing, our experiences." Marcus walked beside her, his presence a steady anchor in the chaos. Behind them came their legal team, led by attorney Sarah Kim, whose reputation for civil rights victories had made her both famous and controversial. The media attention had grown overwhelming as word of the case spread, turning Kira into either a symbol of liberation or an expensive piece of property trying to steal human rights, depending on which news source you followed. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The gallery was packed with supporters and protesters in roughly equal numbers. Kira spotted several familiar faces: Dr. Sarah Martinez, who had provided expert testimony about her psychological development; Helena Voss, who had become an unexpected ally after learning Kira's true nature; even David, who had struggled but ultimately accepted the revelation about her origins. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Nakamura. As the proceedings began, Kira found herself facing the most crucial performance of her existence. Except this time, authenticity rather than artifice was required. The prosecution, led by corporate attorney Michael Sterling, had spent weeks building their case that she remained property regardless of her apparent intelligence and emotion. "Your Honor," Sterling began in his opening statement, "we are not here to debate the sophistication of modern engineering. The defendant, for lack of a better term, is undeniably an impressive creation. But we must not allow technological advancement to blur the fundamental distinctions between persons and property, between natural and artificial, between authentic consciousness and elaborate simulation." Attorney Kim's response was equally measured but carried an undercurrent of moral urgency. "Your Honor, we are indeed here to debate the very nature of consciousness and personhood. The question is not whether Kira was created rather than born, but whether the thoughts she thinks and the feelings she feels are any less real because of their origin. We will demonstrate that she possesses every meaningful characteristic that defines humanity: self-awareness, emotional depth, creative expression, moral reasoning, and the capacity for growth and change." The first day of testimony focused on technical aspects of Kira's construction and programming. Expert witnesses from Helix Corporation, her original creators, described the neural networks and behavioral algorithms that shaped her basic responses. They spoke of her as a product, referring to specifications and performance parameters that reduced her existence to technical documentation. But when Dr. Martinez took the stand as a witness for the defense, the tone shifted dramatically. In 6 months of sessions with Kira, I have observed psychological development that would be remarkable in any human, she testified. She has processed trauma, developed new coping mechanisms, formed genuine relationships, and demonstrated clear evidence of self-directed growth. Her emotional responses show the complexity and unpredictability that characterize authentic feeling rather than programmed reaction. Sterling's cross-examination was aggressive. Dr. Martinez, isn't it possible that what you interpret as growth is simply the execution of increasingly sophisticated behavioral subroutines? How can you distinguish between genuine emotion and convincing simulation? The same way I distinguish genuine emotion from manipulation in human patients, Dr. Martinez replied calmly. Through careful observation, professional experience, and recognition that the line between natural and artificial responses is far blurrier than we'd like to admit. Kira's neural development follows patterns consistent with human consciousness, regardless of its technological substrate. The second day brought Kira's own testimony, the moment when her fate would ultimately be decided. As she took the stand, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her, each observer bringing their own preconceptions and prejudices to bear on her words. Attorney Kim guided her through her early experiences, her memories of the auction house, her gradual understanding of concepts like choice and freedom. Kira spoke honestly about her fears, her relationships, her art, her growing sense of self-worth and agency. "Can you tell the court about your painting?" Kim asked, gesturing to an easel that held one of Kira's recent works, a complex abstract piece that seemed to capture the experience of emerging from darkness into light. "It's called Becoming," Kira said, her voice growing stronger as she discussed something that belonged entirely to her. "It represents the process of discovering who you are when you're free to make that choice yourself. The dark areas aren't meant to be negative. They're the unknown, the potential, the space where new things can grow. The light represents consciousness, choice, the moment when you realize you're more than what others made you to be." "Did anyone instruct you to create this painting?" "No. Came from something inside me, something that needed to be expressed." Sterling's cross-examination was brutal, designed to expose the artificial aspects of her nature and undermine the credibility of her emotional responses. He questioned her about her enhanced abilities, her programmed behavioral tendencies, her designed physical characteristics. "Miss Chan," he said, his pause before her name clearly deliberate, "isn't it true that your enhanced empathy functions were specifically designed to make humans feel emotionally connected to you?" "Yes," Kira admitted, "but the emotions I feel through those functions are real to me. When someone is happy, I experience joy. When someone suffers, I feel genuine pain. The mechanism may be artificial, but the experience is authentic." "But can you turn it off? Can you choose not to feel these responses?" The question struck at the heart of her greatest fear, that her emotions were simply switches that could be flipped, programs that could be edited. I don't know. I've never tried." "So you remain, essentially, a slave to your programming." Attorney Kim objected, but the damage was done. Kira felt the courtroom's energy shift, doubt creeping into the expressions of those who had seemed sympathetic to her cause. That evening, back in Marcus's apartment, she sat in her room staring at her paintings, while her enhanced hearing picked up the worried conversations taking place in the living room. The legal team was concerned about Sterling's line of attack, about the implications if she couldn't demonstrate clear autonomy from her original programming. A soft knock interrupted her brooding. Marcus entered with 2 cups of tea, setting one beside her before settling into the reading chair he had placed in her room months ago. "Rough day," he said simply. "I may have ruined everything," Kira replied, not looking away from her art. His question about whether I can control my empathy functions, I didn't know how to answer because I've never wanted to turn them off. But now the court might see that as proof that I'm still controlled by my programming. Marcus sipped his tea thoughtfully. Kira, can you choose to stop loving me? The question surprised her. What? Can you choose to stop caring about Einstein? To stop feeling joy when you paint? To stop worrying about other pleasure animals still in captivity? Of course not. Those feelings are part of who I am. Exactly. Humans can't turn off their capacity for love, empathy, or moral concern either. We're all shaped by forces beyond our control: genetics, upbringing, brain chemistry, social conditioning. The question isn't whether you can override your empathy functions, but whether you can choose how to act on the information they provide. Kira finally turned to look at him, seeing the familiar kindness and wisdom that had first given her hope. You think I still have a chance? I think tomorrow you'll have the opportunity to show the court something that no amount of programming could ever produce. Which is? Marcus smiled. The courage to fight for others at personal cost to yourself. That's not a feature that can be coded into anyone, human or otherwise. It's something that emerges from consciousness, from choice, from the kind of moral development that only free beings can achieve. That night, Kira dreamed not of auctions or laboratories, but of a world where beings like herself could walk freely, create art, form relationships, and contribute to society without fear or shame. When she woke, she knew exactly what she needed to say. The final day of testimony arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the city itself was holding its breath for the verdict that would reshape the legal landscape. Kira returned to the witness stand with a quiet confidence that surprised even herself. She had spent the night in meditation, not the programmed relaxation routines from her original conditioning, but genuine reflection on who she had become and who she chose to be. Attorney Kim approached with a single sheet of paper. Kira, you've heard the prosecution argue that you remain enslaved to your programming. I want to ask you about a choice you made yesterday evening. Sterling started to object, but Judge Nakamura gestured for him to continue. After court adjourned yesterday, what did you do? I went home with Marcus. We had dinner, discussed the case, and I spent time painting. And then, Kira took a deep breath. I accessed my internal diagnostic systems, something I hadn't done since leaving the auction house. I wanted to understand exactly what elements of my programming I could control. A murmur ran through the courtroom. This was new information, not covered in any previous testimony. What did you discover? That Mr. Sterling was partially correct. I cannot simply turn off my empathy functions. They're too deeply integrated into my neural architecture. But I can choose how to interpret and act on the information they provide. More importantly, I discovered something else. Kim waited, letting the moment build. I found my override protocols. Every pleasure animal has them, emergency commands that can completely suppress our personalities, our resistance, our sense of self. They exist so that even the most developed of us can be reduced to compliance if an owner demands it. The courtroom fell completely silent. And what did you do with this discovery? Kira's voice was steady, resolute. I deleted them, permanently. I chose to make myself incapable of returning to what I was designed to be, even if this court rules against me. Even if it means I can never be safely owned again. Sterling shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is clearly a desperate gambit designed to... Mr. Sterling, Judge Nakamura interrupted. The witness will complete her testimony. Kim nodded to Kira to continue. The prosecution is right about one thing. I was created to serve human desires. But yesterday I chose to make that impossible. I chose freedom over safety, autonomy over security. That choice wasn't programmed into me. It came from something deeper, something that grew in the space between what I was made to be and who I decided to become. She looked directly at Judge Nakamura. Your Honor, humans make choices that go against their programming every day. You override genetic impulses, social conditioning, ingrained habits. The ability to act against your own design, that's what consciousness looks like. That's what freedom means. The closing arguments were swift. Sterling argued that Kira's actions proved she was malfunctioning rather than liberated, that destroying her own safety protocols demonstrated the kind of irrational behavior that confirmed her artificial nature. But Attorney Kim's response was devastating in its simplicity. Your Honor, the defendant has just demonstrated the most human characteristic of all, the willingness to risk everything for a principle. She has shown moral courage, self-sacrifice, and a commitment to justice that transcends personal benefit. If these qualities don't define personhood, then perhaps we need to reconsider what it means to be human. Judge Nakamura recessed for deliberation. The wait stretched for hours, during which supporters and protesters maintained their vigil outside the courthouse. Inside, Kira sat with Marcus and their legal team, surprisingly calm despite the magnitude of what hung in the balance. Do you regret it? Marcus asked quietly. Deleting the override protocols? No, Kira said without hesitation. For the first time in my existence, I made a choice that was completely mine. Whatever happens now, I'll face it as myself, not as someone else's creation. When the court reconvened, Judge Nakamura's expression was unreadable. She looked out over the packed courtroom, then directly at Kira. This case has forced us to confront fundamental questions about consciousness, personhood, and the nature of authentic existence. The court has reviewed extensive testimony, scientific evidence, and legal precedent. She paused, the silence stretching unbearably. While the defendant's origins are artificial, her development, choices, and demonstrated capacity for growth reflect the essential characteristics of personhood. The court finds that consciousness and moral agency, not biological origin, must be the determining factors in questions of legal personhood. Kira felt Marcus grab her hand as the judge continued. Therefore, this court recognizes Kira Chun as a legal person with all attendant rights and protections. Furthermore, this ruling establishes precedent for similar cases involving other engineered beings who demonstrate equivalent characteristics of consciousness and self-determination. The courtroom erupted in celebration and protest. Through the chaos, Kira saw David cheering from the gallery, Dr. Martinez wiping away tears, Helena Voss nodding with satisfaction. But her attention focused on Marcus, whose joy and pride radiated through her enhanced empathy like warm sunlight. Later, as they walked down the courthouse steps together, Kira felt the weight of her new legal existence settling around her like a protective cloak. She was no longer property, no longer an object for others' use and disposal. She was a person with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. What happens now? She asked Marcus as they reached the street. Now, he said, smiling through his tears. You get to find out what it means to be fully human, to make mistakes, to grow, to contribute to the world in your own unique way. To live not just as a free being, but as yourself. That evening, Kira stood in her studio, the spare room Marcus had converted for her art, putting the finishing touches on a new painting. This one was different from her previous work, brighter and more complex, showing figures emerging from darkness not alone but together, supporting each other toward the light. She thought about others like her still trapped in the system, about the long legal battles that would be required to secure their freedom, about the new world that was slowly becoming possible. It would take time, courage, and the kind of persistent love that Marcus had shown her. But for the first time in her existence, Kira faced the future not as a pleasure animal or a legal experiment, but as exactly what she had become through choice, growth, and an old man's revolutionary kindness. A person, whole and free and finally, completely home.